So a couple of weeks ago I bought this frame secondhand and I wanted to see if I can turn it to a super bike. It just came back from the frame painter and this is how this turned into this. My name is Michael and welcome to Crankset. So this is going to be a very special episode. It's going to be a long one. There's a bunch of stuff to do. Let's start with putting in the threadless headset. There was a Chris King headset that came with the frame when I bought it used. So it's just a little bit scruffed up, but I think in general it's still good. So we're going to reuse that just in terms of upcycling as much as we can. Insert inappropriate joke. Okay, so obviously before we put in the headset, we gotta properly grease it. So grease the head tube. So I'll just put my gloves on just to stay clean. Zack, 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 zack. Now it's time to press this thing in. Okay. Try to not fall down now. Okay, now we can put the fork in. Zack, zack. Okay, that looks good. You can put up the top part of the headset just to finish it up nicely. There we go. Okay, so now we want to put the stem on. So we're going to put a little bit of carbon grip paste onto the fork. So now we're going to put the stem on here. So it looks like we might have to put one spacer at the top, because when we put in the compression plug, you'll see there's this little bit sticking out here. So we're basically gonna put one spacer on top, then start compressing it. But that's fine for now, I think. What do you think? Should we cut it down? Maybe we'll put the spacer underneath, huh? So I think I found my way around needing a spacer at the top or a spacer at the bottom. So normally there's a regular compression plug, right, with this thing at the top. But now I found this one. It doesn't have this thing at the top, so you basically just slot it in. You need to make sure that it doesn't fall into the steer tube. Now we're gonna tighten it, 4 Newton meters. Let's give that a try. In the meantime, I'm gonna Google up how many Newton meters we actually need for this to be safe. There's of course safety first. So the next thing we're gonna be assembling are gonna be the handlebars. We get these rather light OG Afghan handlebars. We definitely got to put on some carbon assembly paste on here, the main contact points with this with the handlebar. And what's nice about these handlebars that they have this little texture here. Yeah, so it's pretty roughed up here. It's gonna grip better. That's what I'm trying to say. So I guess even without carbon assembly paste, these kind of handlebars would be fine. But you never know. So rather than me moving the camera around, I thought why not move the stand around. So now let's assemble those front clips. Loving it? Okay, good enough for now. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do is pop in that bottom bracket and then start assembling the Shimano R1000 group set. Let's go. So first we're gonna add some grease. Okay, and then on the bottom bracket we should have little indicators. There you go, with a little L here. There you go. That way we know if it's the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the frame. This is the right one. It shows you written on it which direction to tighten it. So you should be able to screw it in by hand quite far. If you feel any resistance already in the very beginning, then you might want to thread it out again and give it another try, because you might be cross-threading it if your threads are okay in general. Nice and smooth. We'll need our torque wrench, big torque wrench, massive one. And this is pretty much an end piece that's there, especially for bottom brackets. You might have another tool that more looks like a regular wrench, maybe with those little indents. But yeah, this piece you're able to mount it to a torque wrench, so you have a little bit more control. Obviously, this is a little bit too big for the bottom bracket that we have, so we have this little Shimano kind of adapter, which you just put inside of your torque wrench. So here we go for 40 Newton meters. So if you don't have a torque wrench, 40 Newton meters just means pretty tight. There you go. That's it. Bottom bracket mounted. Job done. So the next thing we want to do here is add the crankset. So let's go. Let me mount you back on the tripod. What are we going to do first? Grease it up. Put the grease all over it. Grease up the shaft. With a good push. Nice. Then on this side, put a little bit of grease in here. Fantastic. Now there's this little end cap, which is there to basically compress and push this arm in onto the axle. Normally there is a tool for that. I just don't know where mine is at the moment, so I'm just doing it with getting my finger locked in here and then turning it. There you go. That should be good. Spins nice and easy. Fantastic. So what we're going to do now is torque up those bolts here to, I think, around 12 Newton meters. So everything is nice and secure. And there is this little pin up here. See, there's this little pin here, which is basically a security pin. So now it is up there. You can push it in. Now it's locked in. So now, even if the screws are loose, you wouldn't be able to pull off the crank arm. So it's basically just a security measure that if you didn't do a good job on torquing those up, or for whatever reason those screws get loose during a ride, that this thing is not just going to fall off with you maybe crashing, I guess. So let's set the torque wrench to, I say, 12 Newton meters. Okay, and the one again. Okay, and this one once more. Okay, fantastic. There you go. So, crank's installed. So, it is slowly starting to look like a proper bike, I would say. So, next thing we want to do is going to be the rear derailleur. This beautiful Jura Ace R9000 short cage rear derailleur. Let's see, same thing here. You really want to find the thread. It should screw in nice and easy. At the moment it isn't. So I just need to give it a couple tries. So the thread, there you go. The thread fits perfect. Okay, I'm gonna take it out, screw it out again a little bit, just to make sure that there's really enough grease in those threads. I'm actually gonna put some grease onto the actual threads of the rear derailleur. I think that might be even better. Okay, let's do this again. Yeah, it screws in way easier this way. So, okay, learning put the grease on the screw and not into the thread. Go. So this one's also supposed to be pretty tight. We do this without a torque wrench this time. Okay. Looking good, I'd say, huh? So next thing is going to be a job that I'm not the biggest fan of, and it is having to assemble front derailleur clamp, but I'm not the biggest fan of it because I always worry that it's gonna wear out the paint job, which I guess it does, but you're not really swapping that clamp out quite often, and if you swap it out, it's gonna be sitting where the previous one was sitting. So I guess you should be fine. What I'm gonna do now is, this is the clamp, and this is the front derailleur. So I'm gonna assemble those two first, so I can then match and define where the clamp, on which height it should actually be sitting on the frame. So I don't need this little thing because it's going to be sitting on a flat front anyways. I just see that there's another screw in here which is pushing against the clamp. I need to screw that, loosen that up a little bit, because otherwise the front derailleur is not going to mount straight to the clamp. Now I can tighten this one again properly. And we just now need to see on which height it should go. So normally you want this, I would say, around 1 millimeter above the teeth. You also want to have it aligned this way, all right, that they are flush kind of, or parallel, perfectly parallel to each other. Looks good like this. So now I'm basically just gonna tighten up the front derailleur clamp. Okay, so Google says 2.8 Newton meters to 4 Newton meters. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna set it to 3, maybe 3.5. Okay, there we go. Now let's move on to the brakes. So for the brakes, we have this beautiful EE lightweight rim brakes. First of all, as always, we're gonna add a little bit of grease to the thread. So nothing's gonna seize here. And we're gonna torque them up just a little bit, because we will have to adjust them and center them once the rims are on anyways. So, okay, surprise, surprise. For the front, we also get another EE brake. We're gonna put some grease on the thread. Let's mount this one. And again, don't torque it up too much because we're gonna be adjusting and centering it in a bit anyways. Okay, for the next one, we're gonna do the seat post. This is a very special one because I don't know why, but this seat post diameter, it was a very special one. It is 29.4 millimeters, which I wasn't able to find any except this one from a company called Thomson. It's not a carbon seat post, so it's not the lightest one, but yeah, I guess we'll have to work with it anyways. We don't have to tighten it too much because we'll have to be doing a little bike fit later anyways. Get some light in here. Yeah, too much. Enough. It's time for the brake levers. So these are Dura Ace 9000s as well. Good condition. Only had to swap out these top caps because they've been pretty scratched up from the previous owner. Okay, so this left one, let's see if we got to loosen up the screw or if it's loose already enough. I think we might have to loosen up the screw a little bit. This one goes up easier. A little, that should be good enough. So now we gotta align it. I would say this looks kind of good. Tighten the screws a little bit. Normally, I should have done this earlier with the handlebar out on the floor so I can really match these to exactly the same height. Now I'm gonna eyeball it a little bit and maybe course correct later. Okay. Don't over tighten that screw, especially on a carbon handlebar. You don't want to hear that crack noise that I've heard already multiple times with carbon, which basically just triggers another order the same day, mostly the same night. Okay, So that looks good. I think we can get to cabling. Let's go with the shift cables first. Jag wire, use them on all my bikes so far. Never had any issues, kind of like them. Has a nice color. Like this. Should go well with the disco paint. Okay, so now I'm putting it down here into the inline adjuster. And now we're gonna roughly measure where's the cable gonna go along. So I would say we gotta cut the cable somewhere around here. So we have a little bit of flex in here so that basically the handlebar can twist in either direction. We're gonna cut it somewhere here. We get our cable cutting tool. Nice B-twin, high quality product from Decathlon. Cut it here. Done. Gonna make sure that the opening's nice and round, but looks good. And we're gonna put that end cap on here. Fantastic. Grease it up a little bit. So I'm gonna put a little bit of grease on here and into that connector point, also on that end cap, so there's no water going into the cable housing. Good. So I wonder if I'm there we go. 50 times the charm. We put here into the barrel adjuster again. B12 tool and cut. Just reminded me that maybe I should be talking to the viewers, so you, like some of those people on TikTok. Hey, you look amazing today. You're glowing. You know, if you haven't watched it, if you haven't seen that yet, I think it's worth a Google. Quite entertaining what's going on with humanity these days. Okay, so now we can look at the rear end. Okay, so for the rear part, the cable that basically goes along the down tube and then comes down here, you see there's another stopper here for a cable that goes into the rear derailleur. Luckily, in the box, there is already a cable pre-cut, which has a little bit more flex than the other cables to it. So what you can do is basically you just fit it in here. Oh, there's a little bit of paint in there, huh? This is nice and exciting, huh? We'll try it with the cable tension afterwards. That should help. And yeah, this piece just goes in here. Job done. It is the next day, so I would say let's continue, finish this up. Hopefully today. We're gonna route through the cables for the shifters. For that, we gotta pull back the rubber. There is a little opening here. It's important that you switch the lever to the absolute maximum using the smaller switch, and then we push this through. And exactly, pull it a little bit. Fantastic. And now we basically take the cable end and put it into the outer housing we already have here installed. So just push it through, and we push it through until it comes out from here. There you go. And then we basically just keep pushing it through, or we can actually pull also on the other side until it's completely fantastic. Now we have this little flap here, so we gotta pull back a little bit of the rubber. Here, close that cap. Great, looking good. Now we do the same thing on the other side. So next thing we're gonna do is guide those cables to the shifters. So the left-hand cable, which is going to the front shifter, it's going to be routed along the down tube. There is a little plastic routing piece mounted here below the bottom bracket, where the cable then goes up and into the front shifter. And with the rear shifter, similar, goes down the down tube, also through this little guiding bit of plastic here, and then follows along the, what is this called? It's called the chainstay. So it follows along the chainstay and then goes into the rear derailleur. So let's do it. In the shift cable set, there've been these little small rubber pieces here, which we now are gonna mount on the cables, on the naked cables along the down tube. These are basically just there that if you're riding and you're going over bumpy terrain, that the cable is not going to be slapping against your paint and against your frame. Protective little loopsies. And you can space them a little bit. One is up here, one is down here. And then you basically just guide the cable through that little plastic part here. And then you do the same thing with the rear derailleur cable, and you guide it through the plastic piece. There we go. And just to finish guiding the cable to the rear derailleur, and then we guide it into the housing again, hoping that it's going to pop out back there. There it is. Okay, we spaced the little rubber pieces apart a little bit, so nothing slapping against the frame. As you hear, it's only the rubber that's making contact. Okay, so for the front derailleur, we grab the cable and we guide it through here. There we go. And towards us, or even down so it's out of the way. Give it a good pull, and we tighten the screw. Okay, now similar story with the rear derailleur. We basically have to clamp it in here. And we remember that we had that outer housing, that cable housing, that wasn't fully going into the stopper on the frame. So we're not like fully tightening it now, because we hope that now through the pressure we can basically push this little part still into the frame. So let's give it a try. So far, so good, I would say. What you basically want to avoid that the cable is in here now in a position and you shift up on the lever and nothing happens, no movement happens on the rear derailleur. So you want to basically have enough tension on here that even already on the first click there is movement. I'd say so far so good. Next we're gonna cable up the brakes. Motorcycle passing by. Okay, so for the brakes we get another jack wire set, which includes the cable housing, the cables, and a bunch of little pieces that you need to basically put everything together. As always, we use a little bit of grease in that opening where the housing goes into in the shifter. And we're just gonna try to measure it, make sure that it's really pushed all the way in. Otherwise you might end up cutting the cable a little bit too short. We give it a little bit of leeway so that you can move the steerer. And I would say we'll cut it somewhere between, and nice clean cut. Gonna put on one of these on it into this little cable stop. Fantastic. And then we'll have again one of those plastic or metal pieces. It's like a little bit of a reducer in diameter, so it fits in here, and then from here it has to go into the brake. So as you see, that's a rather short one, but those CE brakes, they are a little bit special in regards to how much cable you need to give them, because when you brake, the cable is also moving with them. So this piece is moving back and forth. So you need to give it a little bit of extra length. Nice. In here, we also have a little reduction cup. We put it on here and into the brake. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, and this cable goes into the front brake. And again, we need a little bit of extra housing, but it's going to be moving this way, so we don't actually need that much. So we'll cut it over here. Okay, reduction cap. Put it onto the end and into the brake. Looking good. Nice and clean. Okay, now let's put the cables in. Similar story as with the shifters. It's a fairly easy install. You put it in from the front and you push it through, and this one should come out over here, and it does. There it is. So what are we going to do now again? You hear it already. The cable can slap against the frame, so we're going to put a couple of those rubber pieces on top of the cable again, and we pull the cable through all the way to here, feed it into that outer housing, and just push it through until it comes out from the brake, and then just pull it all the way through. So when it comes to the installation of the brake cable, the cable has to go in between here, so through here, and it's gonna be mounted and secured with that screw. So first of all, we gotta loosen up the screw, and now we'll have to feed this cable through here, and somehow in between the plate, there's a little plate in here and the screw that holds it in place. So it's a bit more fiddly than any other brakes I've ever mounted. Got it. Great. Make sure that's fully pulled through the housing. And let's secure it with a little bit of tension. We can still tweak that afterwards. And you see what I mean? That you see that the cable is moving quite a bit, which is why I need a little bit extra cable compared to some other brakes. Okay, let's quickly do the same with the front brake. So we're also gonna put it through here again. There we go. So now we're gonna do the exact same install as with the rear one. Okay, I would say that we're almost down to finishing touches. So now that we just mounted the brakes, let's put in some brake blocks. So what's also a little bit special about these brakes is that the brake pads are not secured by any screw or anything, which might seem risky to some, but actually shouldn't be. You basically just push them in. Go. Because the wheel is spinning this way, to this direction, right? So when you're braking, it's only pushing the brake this way, and there is a stop here, obviously, so the brake's not able to fall out, really. So you just need to make sure that the direction of those brake pad mounts is the right way around. Okay, nice. So the next thing we might want to do is saddle. So for the saddle, we have a fully carbon AliExpress 20 euro saddle, which was my first saddle, which I bought I think 2 or 3 years ago, and was riding great. So let's put it on this bike now. So I gotta say, I'm not the biggest fan of mounting saddles on a seat post like this, because it is very fiddly. I just noticed that the seat post is also mounted backwards around. There we go. Okay, that looks good. We have the rear one a little bit. It should already be fairly tight. Let's keep it like this for now. We'll check it once the bike is fully built up. When it's even, I can already see that it's rather pointing upwards, but that's fine for now. So we're gonna tighten up the expander plug to 5 Newton meters. Okay, so we're already at 5 Newton meters. So now that we're here, we want to straighten the handlebars before we tighten them up. It looks good. Okay, so one rookie mistake you want to watch out for is you first need to put on the top cap here and start compressing everything together before you tighten up those plugs here. Because otherwise, if this is already tight, nothing's really going to happen because it's just going to be pushing against the stem. This doesn't need to be super tight. It's only there to compress everything in here together. If you over tighten it, it can happen that everything will be so tight and so stiff that you can't really steer properly. You still want this to be loose and to move around freely, but yeah, it's basically just you need to find the middle ground between being too tight and too loose where this falls off. So what you definitely don't want to have is to have any play in here in your headset with things moving around. So basically it just has to be tight enough for that. So let's leave it like this for now. We can also loosen or tighten it up later, that's also fine. So now is the time to tighten those screws from the stem. 3.5 Newton meters, kind of a deja vu, like if I would have done this already today. Yep, other side. And here. Okay, looking good. So now let me quickly cut the excess cables a little bit, not completely, so not to the final length yet, but just really the excess length that's basically even touching the floor here. Okay, so now let's clean up the cockpit here a little bit so we can put in the bar tape. So I like to secure the cables already to the handlebar with a little bit of electrical tape. Let's put on the bar tape. I like to start from the inside. To basically finish it off here, which would mean, because we want it to end on the bottom, I'd cut the bar tape here. And now we want a straight line, so we need to cut the bar tape along this axis here, or along this line. So normally I just start cutting like this, roll it back a little so I can properly cut it. So now I see that we have a nice straight-ish line. We take our electric tape. Sometimes there's also tape in the box. There was also tape in the box here, but it had a big logo on it, which I didn't really like. So now I'm basically just gonna put the electrical tape on here with a tiny bit of tension and around. Okay, maybe another loop. That's looking good. And we're done with one side. So once the bar tape is nicely wrapped, basically just stuff the ends in here and plug everything up with the end plug that came with it. Just push it in, and you're good. So big next exciting step, we gotta put a wheel on and fit the chain. So this is a rather old school retro frame, so it's only fitting, I'd say 23 to 25, I'd say max millimeter tires. These are now 25 millimeter tires. I would say they just fit. There's maybe 1.5 millimeter each side. But the plan is to get nice deep section carbon wheels from Elite. So they're rather budget AliExpress kind of wheels, which I've been riding on, I think, my first bike as well. I sold them in the meantime, but I think for this one, they're gonna look great. And they have also narrow 25mm rim width versions. So that's gonna be an upgrade for this bike build at some point. So let's fit the chain. Okay, so luckily I have a chain from a previous bike. Let's see if it's gonna be long enough. The method that I'm using to fit the chain is I'm fitting it onto the big ring in the front, and I'm fitting it onto the big ring in the back, stretching the rear derailleur quite a bit. And yeah, that's the way I'm sizing it. So let's put it on. Oh, maybe I don't even have to shorten. We'll just try it at that length. I wouldn't shorten it further for now. So I'm using the quick link system. Little end pieces. Normally they're supposed to only be a one-time use based on Shimano, but I've used them already a couple of times, especially when you're shortening the chain and then you find out that it's maybe not short enough, and then you have to do it again. You sometimes don't want to use up another link for this. So we'll do the same thing here. And then I got the quick link tool to basically just stretch it out. Grab it here. We pull it apart until it clicks, and then we're good. So now we're going to quickly test the indexing of the rear derailleur and the cassette. Indexing basically just means whenever I'm switching gear using the levers, if it's cleanly jumping in between those different gears. So let's see. Going to be pedaling. One down. Looks good. Looks good. Very nice. And up. Up's not so good. So now we see that upwards it's not really jumping yet, so we increase the cable tension a little bit using this cable adjuster. So basically when we turn it, counterclockwise, we're increasing the tension. Now it jumped. Let's go down again, okay. One up, 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 one up. Nice. I'd say perfect. Now we're gonna test how the front derailleur is switching. So we're in the big ring, jumping to the small ring, and back into the big ring. Okay, we see it's not pushing it up enough. So we have to also increase the cable tension here now. So we go down again to loosen the cable tension. So now what I'm gonna do is I want to increase the cable tension a little bit. So before we start playing with the inline adjusters on the down tube, I first want to loosen up the cable completely, and I feel that here when I pull it, there is a little bit of slack. So the tension could be higher. So let's see if we can increase the tension just by hand for now. So we loosen up this bolt. And we're just gonna pull it in by hand. So you want to give this a good pull, good strong pull, and then tighten the screw. This is also the reason why I didn't cut the cable to a very short length, otherwise it would be very hard to grab it now. Okay, so now let's give it a try, if it can switch up to the big ring. That's looking good. Switching down, there we go. Switching up, switch down, switch up, switch down. So let's see if we're in the big ring and the last. Okay, so that's another problem. If we're now in the big ring and we're in the smallest sprocket in the back, we hear that it is the chain is touching the front derailleur. So now we basically got to adjust the front derailleur a little bit. Okay, I'm trying to get you as close to the action as possible. So you maybe remember in the very beginning of the video we adjusted a tiny little screw here, which was pushing against this little mount for the front derailleur. So now we're going onto that screw and we're turning it clockwise until we see that the front derailleur cage is moving away from the chain. Now it's nice and quiet. Beautiful. Okay, so just some more final tweaks. We still need to tighten the handlebars properly in position. So I think it's still a bit too high. There we go. This stem actually says 5 Newton meters. So I would say go to 4 because we put some carbon grip paste on. So we should be fine even with a little less torque. 4, 4, 4, 4, that. Okay, check all the bolts again as we did the round. Okay, so now it's just time to center the brakes, and I would say then we're good. As we got such a slim rim here, we need to tighten the cable a little bit more so that these come together further. So we gotta loosen up the bolt again. Tighten everything up. So pull the cable until they get closer to where we want them to be. I would say somewhere around here. And now we tighten the bolt again. Okay, let's say that looks pretty good. We can still tweak it a little bit later on with this little screw to add a little bit more tension if we want them to be even closer than that. So now let's center the pads. Just move the pads onto where the brake track is. Tighten them here. Okay, do the same thing on the other side. So now we can tighten the rear screw to have it centered and fixed, and then the rear brake is done. Okay, so it's already almost 11 p.m. I'm gonna call this a day. Final tweaks tomorrow. I think what's left is only front brake, putting the front wheel in, adjusting the saddle properly, and yeah, putting the bottle cages on. I think then we're good to go to do a test ride. Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to it. Good night. So, third day of building up the bike. What happened yesterday after I turned the camera off? I was fiddling around with the saddle still a little bit. Turned out that you can't really mount a carbon saddle on this seat post, at least not with this clamp, because of the oval shape. So carbon seat posts with carbon rails normally don't have round rails, but oval rails, so they're kind of a bit thicker and higher, and that those screws basically just haven't been long enough to mount it there. So I just swapped it out for a physique saddle that I found in my basement. Yeah, so I would say let's do the last little tweaks. We'll start with putting on the bottle cages, then we put on the front wheel, center the front brakes, and I'd say then we just cut down the cables, put the cable ends on, and we're good. Okay, so for the bottle cages, we get some good old AliExpress parts. I guess, I don't know, 5 or 10 bucks pop. Also some titanium screws, you know, because every gram counts. So let's mount those on. Also, if you've been watching until here, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It helps me out a lot, especially as this is a new channel. I'm trying to grow it a little bit. So basically every like counts. So I definitely appreciate if you would do that. Of course, if you enjoy the content. If you think it's and you just watched until here, just trying to find out how bad it's going to be overall, then it's also fine if you don't hit it. Screw this in as far as I can by hand. And the top one. Side. Okay. One more thing I just thought of. I think this bike needs a computer mount, and I just found one. Of course, I think it's also AliExpress. Metal up front mount. So let's quickly put this one on as well. Okay, so how's this gonna work? We're gonna remove those bottom screws, and then we're gonna put these long screws in with this little spacer. So basically the mount is gonna be mounted somehow like this, with this little spacer here, and basically just sitting right below the stem. So let's remove those bolts. Let's try exactly to know. Okay, so now I'm gonna try to put in the front wheel while it's still on the stand, so it's gonna be easier to play around with the brake. Let's see if that's gonna work. Oh, maybe. Nice. Looks kind of like a proper bike, huh? So what's left now? I think only cutting the cables to length, putting the end pieces on, giving it a nice polish, and we're good. Test ride. So I'd say we're done now. I'm just gonna add my speed plate pedals, then I'm gonna drop the frame onto my indoor trainer and take a quick virtual ride, try to get a rough fit in place, and yeah, see how this thing performs before I take it outdoors. Let's get all that grease off. I'm sure you want to know what the weight is, so let's weigh it. Let's reset. $7.89, not so bad. So unfortunately it looks like I can't install this bike on my trainer because of this. You see, this has a little lip going here over the top, which unfortunately interferes with this part on the Wahoo trainer. So I guess we'll just have to ride it outside.
Good morning. So it's the next day. I'm a little bit in a rush because I need to go to work, but let's quickly change and do a test ride with the new frame. So what can I say? The bike rides fantastic. I mean, it doesn't feel like an old retro heavy steel frame or steel bike at all. I mean, it's not heavy with 7.89 was what we weighed together. It rides amazingly. I mean, it is a slightly bit on the small side for me, but that gives it like a nice aggressive kind of position. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, again, give it a little thumbs up. It would mean a lot to me. And yeah, it would help out building this channel up further. And yes, if you have any questions in regards to building up your own steel frame, drop it down in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. And also, if you're planning something similar, if you're planning to get a new bike, maybe reconsider, rather than buying more and more new stuff, have a look at the secondhand market and try to do your own upcycling project. I mean, this now took me 2 or 3 days now, just after work, a couple of hours. And on the third day, I was already able to ride it outdoors. So I think it's a great fun project and great to work with your hands sometimes, you know, with all the laptop and computer work that we all do. So yeah, I gotta say, enjoy your day. I hope it's as sunny for you as it is here with me in Berlin, and see you in the next one. Bye.